Hey there, and welcome back to the Attract and Stand Out podcast. I'm your host, Darlene Hawley. And around here, I'm all about helping heart-centered entrepreneurs and executive leaders speak up, stand out, and use their voice in big, bold ways so they can build the confidence and the clarity in their messaging. Because when we communicate clearly, you deeply connect, you lead stronger, and you build a business that truly thrives. Whether I'm coaching one-on-one or leading interactive workshops, I love giving women the tools to engage their people, build trust, and make a real big impact. Curious about working together? Head over to darlenehawley.com. Work with me to learn more. All right, let's dive into another episode of the Attract and Stand Out podcast. Welcome back, everybody, to another episode of the Attract and Stand Out podcast. I have with me today Ellen Raim. She is an employment attorney and former, oh my gosh, Chief Human Resource Officer. I started to say the abbreviation and then my brain stopped. So I wanted to say the full words. So she is a former Chief Human Resources Officer who now specializes in guiding young professionals through the complexity. I can't read your bio today, Ellen. Oh my gosh. My audience is going to be laughing at me because I stumble over my words way too much. He is doing amazing things with young people in the world, and I am so excited to have Ellen here with me today. So, Ellen, welcome to the show.
Thank you for having me. I'm really excited to be here.
Apparently, I'm having tongue twister morning where I can't actually read the things in front of me. So, since I did such a lovely job introducing you, can you back us up a little bit? Will you please introduce yourself and tell us a little bit about who you are, what you do, and why you do this amazing work?
Sure. Um, I started my career as an employment lawyer, and so I defended companies when their employees would sue them. And that got to feel like the guy in the end of the parade who's sweeping up after the horses. And I never felt like I was doing anything value add. I was just trying to clean up a mess once a problem had already been handled really poorly. And so from there, I went into human resources and I thought, okay, I'm going to be able to solve problems now. Um, and that was better. And I did that for a number of years. But what I realized was that the higher I climbed the ladder, so that, all the way up to the executive suite, the less and less contact I had with like real employees. It was mostly strategy work. It was work with the executives. It was work with the senior managers. And nobody really works with, early career professionals, people just starting in the workplace,
Yeah.
people who sort of don't know how a company really works. And I was with a company and it went bankrupt. And when it went bankrupt, I thought, okay, I'm going to go out on my own and I'm going to just do all manner of HR things. And I was doing that for a while. I have a 25-year-old daughter, and she knows that I've been in employment law and I've been in human resources my whole adult career. And she would call and she would say, Mom, I need advice. My boss just said this and I don't know what to do, or this thing is going on in the workplace and I don't know whether I should get involved or not. And I would, she's my kid, so I would give her advice. And then my daughter is the most social human in the entire universe. So she has a million friends. Then all of a sudden, her friends are calling me and they're saying, You're Reeve's mom, right? I'm like, yeah. And they said, Well, she says you give really good work advice. So would you give me advice? I'm like, okay, you're on my, I picked up the phone. Sure, I guess I'll give you advice. And so it all sort of started from there. The the work sort of found me, and it's incredibly gratifying to help people get a good start because I'm sure you remember the very first job you ever had. You don't know up from down, and you learn by sort of bumping into walls, or if you're lucky enough, you end up with a mentor, but everybody doesn't. And the world and the workplace is a lot more intense than it was, at least when I was coming up. And I just want to help everybody set off on the right foot so that they can thrive.
Hmm. I love that. I think it's so important. I want to highlight that part about how the work found you, like your passion. I think so often we go into the world, especially as entrepreneurs, we think like I'm really good at the, or we have an idea, we want to go do this thing. And sometimes it doesn't work out the way we want it to. But when we start to pay attention and notice like what are we really gifted at? What are people coming to us for advice for? Like what's our skill set? Where's our talent at in those different places? I think it's something really special can happen because you kind of find like a gift, a superpower that you didn't even know you had in you. And all of a sudden you're like with your daughter, like your daughter was like, "Oh my gosh, you need to call my mom." And like all these, young professionals are calling you for advice, and all of a sudden you found yourself in a situation where now you're doing work that maybe you wouldn't have even, gotten into had it not been for like the special gifts of other people really
Right.
noticing those talents and those pieces about you.
And I think really gratifying about it is, so I have like 28 years of experience doing all of the things. And it's a way to give back. Like it's taking all of and I'm coalescing it and being able to take all this wisdom that I don't know, that was all for the last many years, just helping like the C-suite to really help. And so each one of these phone calls, each one of these meetings, each time somebody buys my book, I feel so good. So it's not only like you said, like you know, it finds you, but it's a superpower, but it's also really gratifying. Like it pays me back in
Mhm.
so many ways.
Yeah, I love that. So as I see a big hole. I do a lot of communication and leadership work inside of organizations. And I always say that I want to work with not just like the executives and the senior leaders in the organization, and not even just the middle, but I want to make sure that everything kind of like builds roots within the organization and that trickles down and like everybody's involved in the conversation and everybody's getting the support and the skill sets that they need so they can develop and move up. What are some of like the big things that you've been able to see as you've been on this journey to help get more support at the with the newer rising leaders in the organization who maybe aren't normally getting the mentors or they're not getting the support. They don't know what podcasts to listen to or what books to read or who to talk to or in those moments, like what are some things that you usually tell those people to help get them in a position so they can start to rise up?
Because there were sort of two questions in what you said, and I'll try to answer them both. One was, what do you do to help young people? What do you tell them? And the other, I think, is what do you tell organizations? And so, how can you kind of help there? So, but let me start with individual young people. Um, I think the most important thing, well, let me back up and say career development has become a DIY. As the world gets more stressful and as so many things are going on in the outside environment, companies are, and prices are going up and tariffs are happening and companies are worried about some of them even staying in business. Um, they're paying less and less attention internally to their employees. They're trying to save money, and one of the places that they cut first is training. And this pretty much falls under training. Let me help your junior employees get better. Oh well, you know what? We could save that money and put it into something else. So it's becoming a DIY thing. And so what I tell them is you still need to learn. You need to grow and you need to learn. And the way that's going to be best for you to do that is to find a mentor. And then I explain to them that, when people think of mentors, some of them think for like Star Wars, they think of Yoda as going to be somebody that's wise and will mentor you in every way possible. But those people aren't always around and they may be too busy to take the time, to spend with you. But so you can find lots of mini mentors. And those could be peers that are 4 or 5 years ahead of you. It could be somebody that you know on the outside. It could be somebody that you click with at a trade show or a seminar. And I tell folks, and I believe this myself, that most people are flattered to help. And I tell them not to ask, don't say I want you to give me a new job or I want to tell me how to get promoted, but to ask for advice about a particular situation. And so people would love to tell you how they would handle a particular situation. And it makes, advice like that is like a gift to both people, right? You get an answer and somebody feels good and smart and important for helping you. And so I tell them that you need a mentor and you need to sit down and try to figure out what you think your career path is going to be. And you can rough it all out on a piece of paper. And then you can go to your manager and say, this is what I think I want to do. And they can help you make it get specific. And when it's got some specificity to it, then you have some idea where you want to go next. And then you can start asking, what next job would I do to get the skills so that I could, continually move up the ladder? So it's become a lot more of a push than a pull. Years ago, big companies had management rotation programs and all kinds of training, and it just isn't there anymore, unfortunately. And then to answer the second part of the question, what do you tell managers and leaders inside of a company so that they invest in their early career professionals? That's been harder than I expected it to be because I think there's a generational rift, and I think that this particular generation is so different from the folks that are in charge right now that are leaders. And so most of the leadership is Gen X, and Gen X was raised, they're sort of a do it your they're sort of a like they figured it out themselves. That's the generation where that's my generation. So we got kicked out of the house on the weekends, and our parents sort of said, "Go play and just come home when the street lights come on."
Yeah.
And I didn't have a cell phone. I didn't have a bike helmet. I didn't have a seat belt. I didn't. Nobody could find me, and so you'd get kicked out of the house. And so I would knock on the door of the next door neighbor, and I would say the next door neighbors had a daughter, and her name was Valerie, and I would be like, "Is Valerie home?" And I would have to talk to an adult and I would have to engage them in conversation. And I called them by their first, but not by their first name, but by Mr. or Mrs. And then you'd amalgamate a group of kids and you'd go figure out what to do. And then you'd be home when the streetlights came on. So we learned uh, creativity. We learned how to work inside of a group. We learned hierarchy because we had to talk to parents. We learned how to take care of ourselves because sometimes somebody's bicycle would break and you'd have to figure out what to do, or you got lost and you'd have to ask the gas station attendant how to get home. And that has all been replaced by much more organized ways to operate. First of all, kids get cell phones really young. Now we have play dates and lessons instead of like the kind of free play we had. Parents are a lot more involved. And so what happens is young people come into the workforce and leaders are judging them from their own perspective. So the way that Gen Xers were raised, it translates into the workforce as you figure it out yourself. I don't need to help you. Your work-life balance, that's silly. We were taught, like you just tough it out. And so you should tough it out. And I don't want to hear about you want to take the weekend off. And so there's some really big rifts and a lot of judgment going on. And so, one of the very first things that I have to try to do with leadership is to convince them to think about the new hires as just different people with different opinions instead of putting all this judgment on top of it. And so what I mostly try to teach inside of a workplace is communication. So people do have very, very different opinions. And I can't go anywhere and tell people that, what I'm working with is early career professionals who are Gen Z and helping managers and Gen Z get along without somebody telling me a story about, oh, this person in my workplace, they're so different and what ridiculous ideas they have. So helping both sides understand how to have non-judgmental curiosity about how they want work to be. And so that's the answer to that second part of the question.
Yeah. I think it's so good. We forget that we come from different generations or that we we're raised differently, or that, I'm Gen X as well, and I'm, raising kids. I've got an adult child that's 29, a 20-year-old, and then I have a 14 and an 11-year-old. And I'm like, even just raising them, like there's some generational things that have changed and shifted so much, from my older son versus like my younger kids now. And we forget that as leaders. We show up, we're doing the things that we know how to do. We see things the way that we see them or how we were taught. And I think a lot of leaders are starting to have to really look at, like, just because I used to do this exact same way doesn't mean it needs to be done this way. Like we need to like sit back and like explore more and see more of what this new generation is bringing to the table. And I know it's a hard shift because most of us are pretty stubborn. Like we're pretty much creatures of habits. We like to do the things that the way that we've always done them, or the way that we see the world. What would you say to a leader who is maybe struggling with, maybe they're even the younger generation, and they're trying to show the leaders inside the organization, like, I have some new ideas, I have some fresh perspective. Like, how do you navigate that conversation for like the younger leader in that moment?
Okay, so I'm going to answer it from both sides too, because I think it's a meet
Yeah.
in the middle. So I think that trust is one of the most important things. It's like the coin of the realm. It's one of the most important things that you need in a workplace. If you are trusted as a manager, you're going to get people to be more loyal and do more work and be more flexible and just be better employees. If you're trusted as um, the subordinate of that manager, you're going to be able to iterate your own situation. And so some examples, right? So if I am the younger person, which is the question you asked, um, and let's say I want more work-life balance. That there are like four or five things that are real tension points. One of them is this, I think there ought to be a cutoff at the end of the day versus no, you should be on 24/7. And so, or you should be findable all weekend long, all holidays, all vacations. You should carry your phone and your computer with you. That's what a lot of leadership thinks. And the younger employees are thinking that's craziness.
Mhm.
And just aside, one of the reasons they think that's so crazy is because when we were coming up, there wasn't as much competition. The world wasn't exactly in the state it's in right now. And so I kind of knew if I worked really hard and I paid my dues and I got in line, I could climb the ladder. That's not the case anymore.
Yeah.
I mean, just look at the world right now, how many layoffs there have been in just the last 6 months from lots of tech companies and from a lot of government jobs. So they don't feel like that social contract is really true anymore. And so
Yeah.
one of the things they want to do is protect some of their time. So if they can't climb, they at least want free time. So that's the logic behind why Gen Z is so protective of their free time. But what I would suggest to a younger leader with a manager who's thinking his mindset is like how Gen X was raised, is to do a couple of things. One, put some trust in the trust bank. So work hard enough and do enough good things that your manager believes that he can rely on you or she can rely on you and that you've got their back. So that right there will then give you some flexibility and some wiggle room where you can start asking for things to be slightly different to fit into a mold that you would like. And then I would tell them to always communicate ahead of time. So let's take work-life balance. If I don't want to work past 5 o'clock or 6 o'clock, whatever, most nights, I'd like to sort of unplug, have a conversation with your manager where you say something like, what's your expectation about being available past 5 o'clock? Because, I have all these things I do in the evenings, like I take another class or what, and I'm not sure, I can respond as quickly as you need me to. So can we work out let's take your expectation and can we work out like a mutually acceptable set of responses? I worked with one young woman, and in the course of helping her, she told me, "Oh yeah, I've just stopped responding to my manager at night." And the hackles on the back of my neck went up, and I said, "Why?" And she said, "Because she writes me all night long and all weekend long, and I think that's the way that she just deals with her own stress, and she never looks at anything until Monday." So once I figured that out, I just didn't answer it, and then I answered all the things on Monday. So there's a when you have a discussion like that, first of all, I told her, go have a discussion with your boss and make sure that that's okay, and make sure that she's not upset that you're not responding until Monday. But if that had been a proactive discussion, then you could say, I've noticed that you send me stuff all weekend long, but you don't actually look at it till like the end of the day on a weekday. Would it be okay? Or I'm assuming it's okay if I don't respond until Monday.
Yeah.
And so that's another way to build trust, and that's another way to really kind of set expectations and really understand. I've never had anybody say, do it my way because I'm the manager and I say so. Most people, when you try to communicate and you try to proactively come to a mutually acceptable solution, they'll participate.
Yeah. It's such a great thing to consider, right? Like we sometimes forget, like we think like I'm just gonna wait or I'm gonna hold off and I'll get the work done on Monday when I get in the office, and we don't know what the other person is thinking. We don't know what they're feeling. And when we can go and have that conversation and have it early and have it often with the people that we're working with, we can really build the communication line, build that trust. And then it makes it so much easier too, because when you see your phone going off, like you might just know like that my manager is sending this stuff, knowing that it's going to get done on Monday, but she's thinking of it or he's thinking of it right now and he's just getting it off of his mind onto my to-do list basically in that moment. But if we don't ask those questions and we don't acknowledge the conversation, we can really, get ourselves in a hard situation where maybe they think that we're not working hard, we're not showing up, we're
Exactly.
not in those moments, but having that conversation and just bringing it forward.
And let me tell you something else that just happened 2 days ago that think is so interesting. There's all kinds of hidden rules that a young person, when they come into the system of an office, they don't know them, and I hope to try to help teach them. But on the flip side too, so I now have a cadre of young folks that I can ask about things like, oh, I want to put out a new ebook. Is this a topic you think is interesting? Or, whatever. They're all helping me be ambassadors. Um, and I thought, okay, all young people want to text. Nobody wants to have an email anymore. So I sent this long text to a whole bunch of folks at the same time. I put them all on a group chat. Can you help me? What you're thinking about all this stuff? And I got a private text back from one of them, and she said, Ellen, this belongs in an email. Text, there's an expectation on text that you respond immediately, and this required more thought than I could respond with immediately. So I'm just not going to respond. And also, if there needs to be something where we have to reveal ourselves to strangers, we're not going to answer in a group. So if you even need to send a text and it's at all something that, is difficult or whatever, text us all one at a time. So this is my field. This is what I'm trying to focus on. And I just learned something. So having a proactive conversation or being able to have a conversation where you don't put your ego in it and you're not, and you haven't breached somebody's trust is so elucidating. You learn so much.
Yeah, I feel like I'm always learning every single day. I'm like, there's always something new, and especially with having teenage kids and young adults, just seeing the world through their eyes and their
Mhm.
like the way that they do things and how things are showing up and all the, abbreviation and the text messaging and like the shortness of it. Like it's definitely something we have to learn and, notice how how the younger generation's using it so that we can build that bridge and make sure that we're, not just coming at it from this is the way it is. This is the only way I'm willing to look at it, but really building that communication line where I see you and I see the differences and I see what you're sharing with me. And I'm, building the bridge so we can continue to have these conversations and continue to go
Right,
deeper in them.
right. And I think from the business of business, if you are a wise leader, you see that this group of people, they're a huge market share. And so the inside of your company needs to look like the outside, and it needs to operate so that you can sell your services to whatever to the
Mhm.
general public. And right now, Gen Z is something like 25% of the population, and they'll be 35% of the population by 2030. And so ignoring this population or saying, like you said, like, no, you have to do it my way, it's just short-sighted.
Yeah, no, I totally agree. When you, as we start to kind of wrap things up before we go into rapid fire questions, like what's a message you really want to get out to organizational leaders and to help support them with this cause? I know you have a book and you have some different things that you're doing, but what are some ways that you can support? And what's like a final thought you'd like to leave with them?
Um, I guess the final thought I'd like to leave is a company is a company works because the people inside of the company are engaged and motivated and willing to stick around and do hard work. And so making sure that you pay attention and help your employees to be able to thrive will only make you a better business. And that means all of the employees, including the early individual contributors, not just focusing on managers. So that's what I think I'd leave with businesses.
Awesome. I love it. So, a couple rapid fire questions for you. If I could buy you a plane ticket and you could go anywhere in the world today, where would you go and why?
I would go to Madagascar because I think lemurs are really cute and I would like to see the lemurs.
I love it. Yeah, I will pack my suitcase and go with you. That would be a fun one. What is on, like, at the end of the day, when you're trying to just kind of relax at the end of the day, are you reading a book? Are you binge watching a TV show? What does your typical evening look like?
Um, so I love reading books about women from World War II that helped the Allies. And there are a million books about really badass women. They were spies and they were just people that were living in villages and thought the war wasn't the great thing. And so we're helping hide people and smuggle things. And so most of the time you will find me reading a book about some woman from his mostly fiction, but or what do they call that? Historical fiction, but about women through the ages that have done like really cool things. The one I'm reading right now is about women in World War One who um in have you ever seen pictures of like those phone phone things where they had to plug in the calls actually. So in World War One, that was the only kind of communication they had. And so they took women telephone operators and they put them on the front lines so that all of the people in the that were fighting could call and talk to headquarters and whatever. And so this book is all about those women and how close they were to battle and things were being bombed all around them. And it's just I'm constantly amazed by how many amazing women there have been. And also it makes me feel good too. Like if I have a bad day, I think, well, I wasn't on the front lines in World War One, so I can get through this.
Yeah, you're right. Like it's a little bit, we're a little bit safer now. We're doing things that are in a little bit a different zone. And when you need to reset, reflect, and recharge, where do you like to go? What do you like to do?
Um, I like to walk in the woods. I can almost feel my tension level, like I can almost physically feel it going down. And when I'm walking around and it's quiet and it's green, that's one of the nice things about living here in Oregon this summer. It's always very green. And so there's always some place I can go hike or even just sit.
I love that. And my last question for you today is in honor of the theme of the podcast, attract and stand out, what's one thing that you would give to somebody else if they wanted to attract the right people towards them and really stand out as a leader?
I think that if you want to attract people to yourself, you need to be open and you need to give first. And so share your ideas, share your feelings, share your work. Um, and I think that that also makes you stand out. I think if you if you let people know that you're willing to help, then I think that lots of people you'll draw lots of people to you and you'll draw good people to you.
Absolutely. Ellen, thank you so much for being on the podcast and sharing your story with us today. I know people are going to want to connect and find you. Where should they go? Where do you hang out?
So you're asking me like my website?
Oh, yeah. What's your website?
Okay.
What social platform? Are you on any social platforms or?
Yeah. So you find me on LinkedIn, but also you can come visit my website. It's peoplematterllc.com. And you can also find me on TikTok because that's my target audience.
Yeah.
But mostly come to my website, I think, for the audience from this podcast today.
Awesome. Beautiful. Ellen, thank you so much for being here. And that's a wrap, everyone, for another episode of the Attract and Stand Out podcast. If you are new here and or if you've been here for a while and you keep forgetting to hit subscribe, hit follow, hit subscribe, whatever, um, on the app, whatever application you're listening to currently today, and tell your friends, let other leaders and entrepreneurs know that there's different conversations happening out there with new ideas, new tips, things to increase your leadership and help support your team and doing amazing things. And all right. As always, remember, I believe in you. You're allowed to stand out. You're allowed to shine. You're allowed to be you. We'll see you next time. Bye, everyone.